Berserk is a story so tonally consistent, so thematically tight, so brutally committed to its own world. And then there's one character who walks in like they wandered in from a completely different anime or manga, and that character is Isidro. I want to break down why I feel like he's a modern shonen protagonist forcibly inserted into a 90s seinen nightmare, and why his presence actively weakens Berserk's tone, themes, and emotional weight. Because Berserk is a story built on suffering and perseverance. Not in a cheap grimdark way, at least as we define grimdark by modern definition, but in a way that feels lived in, historical, and psychologically grounded. Children in Berserk don't get to be children. They get raped, murdered, conscripted, possessed, orphaned, or forced to kill to survive. That's the world as it was depicted for the entire first three arcs. So when Isidro shows up being loud, goofy, horny, plot armored, and narratively cushioned, and it just feels like someone dropped in Naruto or some character from Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood into Schindler's List. Some of you may know how I feel about Fullmetal Alchemist. He just doesn't fit the tone. He doesn't match the themes. He doesn't match the world. He's a modern anime protagonist in a story that predates modern animated protagonists. And that could be interesting, but it's just not in Berserk. Berserk has always had jokes. I'm not like making the argument that you can't have jokes. I'm not saying that jokes can't be in the story, because Puck was the original comic relief, but Puck's humor was brief, light, self-aware, and never derailed serious scenes. Isidro's, on the other hand, is pervy, repetitive, loud, tonally disruptive, and almost always placed in the worst possible moments. It's literally my exact same criticism of Ed from Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, and it pains me that they made like one of the worst protagonists I've ever seen in an anime be brought to my favorite manga that I've ever read. It's so sad. Like when you're having Flora talk about pivotal story details, and I'm seeing Isidro being a perv, or him just saying the stupidest things around the table, how am I supposed to take that scene seriously and not be annoyed at him for even being there? When you have Guts fighting for his life, the world collapsing around him, and Isidro is off to the side doing boob jokes or yelling about how cool Guts is. It's not funny, it's not clever, it's not even character building. It's just noise. The only time that it was actually thematically appropriate was when Guts was broken mentally by Casca being taken. Imagine though that Isidro was much less annoying, and he hadn't consistently been being annoying about how Guts is his hero, but also not piecing together that Guts is the 100-man slayer, and he just yells at Guts to get up whenever he's like completely mentally defeated. Imagine that. But him saying like bastard or just yelling expletives, it just screams a character that isn't supposed to be here. It's kind of possible that he's literally just Corcus, but in the opposite direction, where he actually likes Guts a lot, and he's got Corcus's personality, but toned up way more than it was before. But I just refuse to believe that, given how often he is annoying, rather than just being an asshole who doesn't like a character taking, more of the spotlight than he thinks he deserves. But the worst part, or the worst example that I have of Isidro just being completely tonally deaf in terms of what is surrounding him, is when Guts is fighting the sea god. The stakes are apocalyptic. The tone is just peak Berserk. Brutal, desperate, mythic, and Isidro, he's flirting, joking, being an idiot on the ship's deck. People are literally dying around him. He's nearly close to death himself, and the story pauses to have a goofy anime moment with him and his new anime girlfriend, and then he saves the day because she happened to throw gunpowder in the monster's mouth after she saved him. It's not skill. He doesn't do anything particularly interesting or unique. It's not growth. It's not even courage. It's just happenstance that he survives and happens to know what it is that she threw into the monster's mouth, even though he hasn't even seen the ocean or been on a boat before, because we could presume that because he hasn't seen the ocean. How would he know what gunpowder canisters on a ship would even look like? It's the most modern anime protagonist moment imaginable, and it completely undercuts the scene for me. I'm watching Guts fight fight for his life. He gets barrow trauma. His eyes explode with blood. And we're hard cutting to Isidro being a goofball. And this is like the most tonal. This is where I stopped and I was like, okay, I've tolerated this character up until this point. But it's so annoying to watch him, to bear witness to him, and it be the same kind of humor over and over again. How many times do we have to see this guy being a perv? I don't want to watch it. I'm watching Guts go through like the most intense character arc that has ever been put to page, and I'm hard cutting to somebody being plopped into the story that doesn't need to be there. It's not a minor annoyance. It's a structural problem. I hate to criticize Berserk in this way, but it annoys me too much. I mean, when you think about his characterization, it just gets really worse because Berserk goes out of its way to show that children in this world suffer. It's one of the core themes of the manga. But Isidro had loving parents, a safe home, no trauma, no exposure to the 100 Years' War, no exposure to violence, and no reason to run away given what he tells us that was his backstory. And he escapes a perfectly good life to become a thief who poisons people for food, but is also too scared to kill people. How does that even work? He grew up during the 100 Years' War in Midland, presumably, and somehow he never saw bloodshed. His home was never raided by mercenaries, bandits, or even Shooter's army, but he was also close enough and educated enough to hear about Guts' exploits of being the 100-man slayer, but also simultaneously never got a description of him? How is that possible? So either he lived in the capital, surrounded by nobles, because that's the furthest possible point from all of the bloodshed, but was still poor enough to become a foul-languaged creature, or he's from a completely different country entirely, where Guts' story of beating 100 men single-handedly is somehow believed and popular enough to be told to several villages. Either way, it's contrived. Isidro just doesn't fit this world's rules. And this is what makes Isidro stand out even more. Every other character in the manga fits so incredibly well with the tone that Isidro feels like a studio mandate. Shrike, Farnese, Serpico, even Farnese's brother, who is a joke character, fits more because of how minor of a role he plays. But Isidro just doesn't. He is the only character who feels like he was imported from a different manga entirely. People literally call him Naruto when addressing him outside of the manga, and they're not wrong. What's even worse is that none of his like inferred relatively cushy lifestyle is ever pursued as a story beat for the character. When he finally experiences some level of hardship, it's like the most bare bones thing that could happen. He loses his anime girlfriend, and instead of maturing, he just becomes even more annoying for a brief moment in the chapters by just being an asshole to everyone. He doesn't grow, he doesn't deepen as a character, he doesn't integrate into the world more soundly. He's the only character in Berserk who feels like he's immune to the story's themes. And he doesn't even change for that long. He basically got off scot-free when you think about the things that the other characters have gone through, even the new ones, by the way, and he's still written to be a dickhead. He doesn't change at all. He loses his girlfriend, he's a brief asshole. We switch to Guts being taken to the stupa, and he's basically the same character again. He's not just annoying, he is totally incompatible, and he basically reverts to how he used to be the moment that Guts gets sealed away. He's a modern shonen sidekick shoved into a brutal 90s seinen masterpiece, and it just doesn't have any weight. Every time he's on the page, the story bends around him in ways that Berserk simply wasn't built for. His constant interjections ruin the pacing of many scenes where important dialogue is being exchanged, like when they enter Elfhelm. I mean, he had to be written out of the most important section of that arc by being forced to clean and things like that because his presence is too distracting and none of it is substantive. And obviously Miura knows that, otherwise he would have been present more. Even Serpico gets thrown out a little bit, but at least Serpico has a moment with the main character where they just sit there and they're just chilling. Isidro doesn't get that at all. He's a loser. He doesn't fit into this world, the themes, or the tone. And without some major shift in this speculative second to last arc of the series, I don't think he ever will just be natural in the story.